If there's one thing I've learned after 46 years living in the Arizona desert, it's this: water always tells the truth. People don't. That morning, the sky over Phoenix was absurdly blue. Sunlight poured down on the glass facade of the company building, so bright I had to squint as I walked into the meeting room. On the table before me sat SandPulse 4.0, the model I had built with my own hands, every screw, every valve, every brass gear. A purely mechanical water distribution system that didn't rely on electricity, didn't need software updates every 3 months, and couldn't crash during dust storms or heat spikes. Just mechanics. Something farmers could fix with an old wrench and a bowl of patience. At the head of the table sat Celeste Ward, representative of the Water and Soil Resilience Foundation. She wasn't the kind of client who interrupted or filled the silence with noise. She listened, steady and attentive, as if silence itself carried its own weight. I liked people like that. They didn't rush to judge. They paid attention. Too bad there was someone else in the room. Gareth Cole, 39. His white shirt looked like it had never met real dirt. My direct supervisor, the man investors loved to praise for his vision of digitizing dry region agriculture. I never understood what WeFi was supposed to do for a cornfield, but for Gareth, as long as it lit up and came with a big price tag, it was progress. "All right, Harper," he said, clapping once. "Too loud, too fake. Show everyone your antique." I pretended not to hear the word antique. I powered up SandPulse and let the test flow run through the valves. The sound was small but steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. I caught Celeste's eyes. She gave a slight nod, just enough to warm something inside me. "This valve self-adjusts to incoming water pressure," I explained. "So if the supply drops, the system won't dry pull or kill the crops." I didn't get to finish. Gareth stepped forward with that smile that always meant trouble. "Let me test its durability for the client," he said. I opened my mouth to stop him, but before I could speak, his hand pressed down on the frame. A sharp crack split the air like a snapped copper pipe. The main gear slipped off its axis, rolled once across the table, and dropped to the floor. Silent proof of deliberate stupidity. For a moment, the room froze. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. "Oh!" Gareth tilted his head, feigning surprise. "I barely touched it. If the mechanics are this fragile, how's it supposed to survive the 21st century?" I didn't look at him. I looked at Celeste. Her eyes, God, so sharp. I felt that if she spoke, her words could slice the broken gear in two. No anger, no pity, just precision. I knelt, gathering the small brass pieces. It sounded sad, but the motion steadied me. I knew what I had built had value, and I knew what had just happened wasn't a durability test. It was a desperate attempt to shove me off the project. "Mechanical tech is charming," Gareth went on in his lecture tone. "But what we need now are smarter solutions. Sensors, chips, remote control, the modern stuff." Celeste turned to him and smiled, a light, effortless smile. "I see," she said. "Thank you, that was all." But Gareth's face lit up like a kid who thought he'd been praised. He didn't realize that not every thank you is meant for the person who hears it. The meeting ended. Gareth strutted out, convinced he'd won. I stayed behind, collecting the fragments, careful not to stain my sleeve with oil. Celeste slowed as she passed me. "Harper," she said quietly, "just for me to hear. Do you have a personal card? Not the company one." I nodded and handed her a simple card I had printed myself. Recycled paper, black ink, no logo. She slipped it into her notebook and said, low and certain, "I'd like to hear the real story," without anyone else in the room. Then she left. At the end of the hallway, Gareth was still laughing with a few employees, completely unaware of what had just unfolded. When I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Harper, we need to talk. Privately, not through the company." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then laughed. Dry, short, the kind of laugh only people who've lived too long in the desert can manage. "If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from." "I'm in Phoenix, where every story about water begins with thirst. And you?" I'd love to know where this journey is taking you on the map. I grew up in northern New Mexico, where the rains always came late and the droughts always came early. Out there, water wasn't just a resource, it was a measure of character. People who saved water were seen as wise. People who wasted it, no one talked to them. My father used to say, Harper, you want to know if someone's trustworthy? Watch how they use water. I was a child then, sitting by a tin basin, not realizing that his words would follow me for the rest of my life. Our town had only one irrigation canal. Whenever it clogged, everyone stopped working to dig it open. When the water flowed again, people exhaled like they'd just witnessed a handmade miracle. I grew up listening to the sound of water running through steel pipes, steady, honest, and smelling the rust of systems no one could afford to replace. That was the world that shaped me. Simple, practical, and never fooled by shiny things. I met my husband, Miguel, during a volunteer repair project for the Eastern Farmlands water system. He was a volunteer, and I was a young engineer eager to prove that a skinny girl could handle a wrench as well as anyone. Miguel had bright eyes, the kind of eyes that belonged to someone who always believed in tomorrow. We loved each other the way desert people love shade, quietly, without show, deep enough to feel safe. Miguel died in an accident I'll never forget. A small dam cracked during a brutal drought. I had warned about material fatigue, but the city's budget was too tight. They delayed the repair. The day the dam collapsed, Miguel was helping evacuate a family. He was swept away when the steel gate broke. I still keep his old work uniform, faded fabric, still carrying the scent of the sun. After that day, I made one vow: never let any vital system depend on something fragile, and never let human lives depend on saving money in the wrong place. I left New Mexico a year later, still unable to face the place where it happened. Phoenix, with its glass towers and office voices, gave me a chance to start over. The company I joined promised something I believed in: bringing sustainable water solutions to arid regions. Back then, the CEO was an older man, his hair the color of desert wind. He'd spent a lifetime in the field. He liked the first version of Sandpulse, liked my philosophy that mechanics don't lie. He said, "We serve farmers, Harper. They don't need LCD panels. They need water." I thought I'd found the place to spend the rest of my life. Then he retired, and his seat went to Gareth Cole. Gareth came from a tech startup. Before I met him, I'd already heard the rumors. Young, ambitious, talks like he's live streaming. I didn't care. I just needed someone who understood water. The first day we met, he shook my hand without looking me in the eye. His gaze went straight to the prototype on the table. "Does it have an app version?" he asked. I thought he was joking, so I laughed. But he wasn't. That's when I realized we didn't live in the same world. I tried to be patient until that fateful meeting months later. It wasn't even my presentation that day. A young colleague, Tia, was presenting her sensor system for detecting water loss in old pipelines. Tia was quiet, hardworking, and spent more time in the field than at her desk. She'd spent 3 weeks inspecting every rusted pipe herself, but when her report appeared on the screen, Gareth stood up and said, "These are the results my team gathered." Tia froze, her face burning red, but no one said a word. Gareth kept talking about advanced data analytics, as if he'd been the one kneeling by the ditches under 45-degree heat. Watching that, I understood. He might not hear real water, but he sure could hear the sound of investor applause. Still, I thought I could endure it, as long as Sandpulse got a fair presentation, as long as it reached the farmers who needed it most. But then, part one of the story happened. The prototype was crushed in front of a client. I stood in that meeting room, watching the gear roll across the floor. It felt like losing Miguel all over again. Not in a tragic way, but in the way weak systems always fail right when you need them most. I knew then that if fairness was to exist, I'd have to find it elsewhere. Not through the company, not through Gareth, but through people like Celeste, people who'd lived long enough to know the difference between technology that saves lives and technology that just wants applause. So when I got that message, meet privately, not through the company, it felt like life was reopening a door I thought had closed the day Miguel died. I don't know what's waiting ahead, but for the first time in years, I believe this. Where there's water flowing, there's a way forward. I arrived half an hour early, partly out of habit, partly because my heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. The testing facility of the Water and Soil Resilience Foundation sat beside a riverbed so dry that the ground had cracked like the skin of an old man. Every step I took down the slope brought back old memories, the sound of running water, the scent of rust, and the quiet truth that places like this always revealed more honesty than any boardroom ever could. Celeste stood with her back to me, watching the sunlight tilt into the dry basin. She wore simple clothes, a worn leather notebook in hand. I noticed she didn't turn right away when she heard me coming, the kind of person who'd long since learned to let the world approach her first. "Harper," she said as I came closer. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough weight to make the air still. "I brought this," I said, holding up my sketchbook. "Just notes. Nothing belonging to the company." I spoke a little too quickly, maybe because I could still hear the sound of that gear snapping in my head. Celeste understood at once and nodded slowly. "Thank you. I appreciate people who know where the line is," she said. "In this field, honesty is rarer than rain." We walked deeper into the workshop. Light streamed through the old metal roof, glinting off water tanks, test pipes, and tools repaired by countless hands. This wasn't a fancy lab, but it was the first place in years where I felt no need to defend why mechanics still mattered. Celeste stopped beside a large testing tank. "You know, Harper," she said, resting her hand on the rim, "we once spent millions on the latest electronic systems. Beautiful, polished, and they shut down the moment the power went out." I exhaled softly. "That's why I didn't take that route." "Exactly," Celeste said, her gaze sharp, but not cold. "I want to hear what you couldn't say in that meeting." I opened the notebook. The pages were filled with pencil marks of every shade, the result of sleepless nights. I turned to the page with the new module design. "Here," I said, pointing at a circle diagram. "The pulse valve. It works on the pressure difference between the intake and the ground. When water runs low, it self-adjusts. No electricity, no remote control, no Wi-Fi, no cloud, just gravity and sixth-grade physics." Celeste smiled faintly, the kind of smile that happens when a secret finally gets spoken aloud. "And this," I continued, "is the sand filter module, designed so sand won't clog the mesh. When the flow weakens, it cleans itself by reversing pressure. The repairer only needs to turn one ring by hand." Celeste studied the page, nodding. "Someone tried this 10 years ago," she said, "but they quit because they wanted to add a motor." "I wanted fewer motors," I replied, unable to hide the trace of irony. Then I flipped to the last page, the heat expansion joint. In the desert, the heat cracks pipes easily. This joint expands and contracts with temperature, preventing buildup pressure. If it fails, you replace one small piece, not the whole pipe. Celeste stayed silent for a while. She didn't praise me right away like others did. She studied every line, every stroke of the drawing. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes weren't sharp anymore, but warm, deep, as if she'd finally found something she'd been searching for, but no one had cared to point out. "You know, Harper," she said slowly, "I've met hundreds of young engineers. They're brilliant, but they don't understand what poverty looks like in the field. You do. You understand every grain of sand, every pipe length, and most importantly," she tapped the page, "you still believe mechanics can save lives." I swallowed hard. It had been years since I'd heard that said by someone from another generation. "I want to work with you," Celeste said. "With you personally, not through the company. We'll work here, using only foundation resources. Can you do that?" "I won't touch anything belonging to the company," I said firmly. "No designs, no materials, no data." "Good," she replied. "I don't want you tied to people who can't recognize real value." For the first time in weeks, it felt like new air was flowing into my lungs, light but strong enough to help me stand straighter, breathe deeper. We set our schedule for evening work at the workshop. Celeste would supply the basic materials. I would rebuild the prototype from nothing, piece by piece. When I left the facility, the late afternoon sun cast a pale golden glow over the dry riverbed. I turned on my phone to check the time and immediately saw an email from the company. From Gareth Cole, "Adjusting your responsibilities. Starting next week, your focus will be on report updates and administrative tasks. I smiled, a thin smile. When people are afraid of losing their light, they start by turning off someone else's. But what Gareth didn't know was that while he tried to shrink my space, somewhere outside, a larger door had quietly opened, and no one would ever have the power to close it again. I got into my car, looked once more at the sunlight touching the empty riverbed, and for the first time in a long while, I knew Miguel would be proud of what I was about to do. Mechanics are silent, but that silence has never been weak. My mornings now were reduced to tasks no hydraulic engineer should need a degree for: entering office supply numbers, checking pen inventory, updating spreadsheets that no one ever read. Gareth sent emails laced with exaggerated politeness, the kind people use to hide a real intention. Harper, this week, please prioritize administrative tasks. I'll handle the technical meetings. I replied with one word: understood. Not out of obedience, but because I no longer had the energy to waste on battles whose outcomes Gareth had already written himself. That afternoon, I stopped by the local hardware store. The Navajo owner gave me the kind of look I'd seen many times in people who'd spent their lives where water was scarce: part understanding, part empathy, and no unnecessary questions. Fixing water again? He asked. I nodded. Take what you need, pay later. In the desert, people don't always give you what you ask for. They give you what they believe you've earned. I left the city as the sunlight turned the sky to dark copper, a color that only appears where the difference between day and night can reach 30 degrees. The abandoned pump station stood ahead, a rusted steel box in the middle of dry land, like a time capsule someone forgot to open. I pushed the door open, hung my flashlight from a beam, and lined up my tools, a ritual that reminded me that no matter how Gareth's company rated me, here in this dusty room, I was still an engineer. I started with the pulse valve module. With no CNC machine or precision tools, I went back to the methods my hands remembered from the field: measuring with a wooden ruler, drilling by hand, grinding with rough stone. When the gear clicked neatly into the metal shaft, a small spark of pride lit inside me. I opened the valve to let the water flow through. The sound was steady, firm, mechanical, like a heartbeat made of steel. But 15 minutes later, the flow started choking. The tone changed, hoarse and heavy. I tilted my head, listening. Sand had found its way into the pipe. I shut the valve, took apart the joints, and let the sand spill onto the concrete floor. Then I laughed, a dry, thin laugh that belonged to desert nights. Basic physics is still more honest than my boss. I cleaned it, tightened it again, and reopened the valve. The flow steadied. The first night ended with my body tired, but a small window of light opening in my mind. 2 days later, I came back to test the self-cleaning sand filter. The design aimed to balance theory and the desert's bad temper. When water pressure dropped, it had to reverse just enough to flush sand out. When strong, it had to hold steady without shaking. I tried 3 times. The first, sand still clogged the mesh. The second, the reverse force was too strong, making the frame tremble. The third, I changed the aperture size, adjusted the mesh angle, and added a thicker rubber gasket. This time, the water reversed gently, cleared the sand, then returned to flow. No rattle, no clog. I wrote in my notebook, stable at 92%. A farmer stopped by while I was running the final check. He carried half a roll of old pipe and 2 cans of beans. Heard the sound of water, he said. If I can fix this, anyone can. I handed him a wrench. He turned it. The filter reversed just as designed. He set the beans on the table. Payment, he said, then walked off. Simple, desert style. By the 8th night, the wind had grown so strong that the roof sheet slammed like the heartbeat of someone losing patience. I was working on the thermal expansion joint, the one thing that would decide whether the pipeline could survive the desert's mood swings. I fitted the steel ring, added the heat-resistant layer, and adjusted each millimeter with a hammer. While pressure testing, a sharp jolt made the back pipe jump. A dry thud echoed. I spun around, rushed to shut the valve, and tightened the coupling. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline, the instinct of someone refusing to let another system fail. When everything settled, I sat on the floor, looked up at the shaking roof, and exhaled. It's fine, I whispered. The next morning, Gareth sent a new email. Harper, you're temporarily excused from all technical reviews. I let out a quiet laugh. If he knew I was secretly building something that could save the entire project from his colorful slides, he'd probably copy the board on every email. That night, the three modules stood side by side under the flashlight beam: the pulse valve, the self cleaning sand filter, and the thermal expansion joint. No shine, no LED screens, nothing to impress investors who liked blinking lights. But they had something those technologies never would. They were patient, honest, and they worked. I turned on the full system. Water flowed, the valve was adjusted, sand washed away, the joint expanded and contracted with the night's breath. I opened my sketchbook and wrote a single word, so small only I would understand it: ready. My phone buzzed just as I closed the notebook. An email from the foundation. Harper, we invite you to present your prototype at the Water Resilience Summit in Santa Fe. No slides needed. Let the device speak for you. I leaned back against the pump station wall, feeling the desert wind cooler than usual. Outside, the desert still roared against the roof. But inside, the water flowed steadily. And for the first time in years, I believed that maybe the things I built in the dark were finally ready to step into the light. Santa Fe greeted me with the thick golden light of a summer morning, dry, bright, and beautiful in the way only places that know true thirst can be. The Water Resilience Summit took place in a community center built of red adobe walls that kept the cool air inside as if guarding something more precious than luxury: life itself. Celeste met me at the door, program list in hand, walking with that calm quickness of someone used to managing chaos without letting anyone see it. Harper, your demonstration area is right in the center, she said. Don't be surprised if the crowd grows larger than expected. We have quite a few eyes waiting to see something that actually works. I nodded. Deep down, I knew everything would run smoothly. Simple mechanics never promise, but they never lie. I set up the three modules on the platform: the pulse valve, the self cleaning sand filter, and the thermal expansion joint. No colorful lights, no background music, just steel, water, and sunlight streaming through high windows. The room slowly filled up, representatives from Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Nevada, local field technicians, agricultural experts, and older farmers, their eyes calm and experienced, watching not with doubt, but with quiet empathy. When the host introduced me, I stepped onto the stage carrying, in a way, the voice of that old pump station. No long speeches, no emotional buildup. I placed my hand on the pulse valve like greeting an old friend. I'll let the device speak for itself, I began. Water flowed gently through the system. The valve adjusted instantly to pressure. The filter reversed smoothly, like breathing. The expansion joint flexed and settled, responding to the room's warmth as if it understood its own environment. No one spoke for the first 5 seconds. Then came the whispers, soft, rippling, like the sound of water soaking into dry soil. An elderly Navajo man, about 75, stepped out from the back row. His skin was weathered, his hands thick with calluses only fieldwork could make. May I try it? He asked. Of course, I said, stepping aside. He approached, picked up the wrench, and turned the joint. The water shifted direction exactly as designed. The filter reversed, as if waiting for his hands all along. He looked around and said, "Slow and clear. If I can fix it, anyone can." The room broke into warm laughter, the kind that comes from recognition, not politeness. A representative from Colorado stood first. Harper, our state wants to pilot this immediately. If possible, we'd like to sign an agreement today. Another voice from Arizona followed. We want 200 units for the Navajo West region. A team from Nevada handed me their cards. Call us this afternoon. This could be the solution for our northern farmlands. I stood still for a moment, not out of surprise, but because it finally felt like someone was listening to what I'd been trying to say for years. Celeste joined me on stage, smiling calmly. She was about to speak when a voice broke the air, completely out of tone. Sorry, everyone, I'm late. Gareth. He walked toward the stage as if the whole conference had been waiting for his dramatic entrance. White shirt pressed, office blue tie, that same confident grin that once ruined the most important meeting of my life. "This is our company's project," Gareth announced loudly. "And these modules," he pointed toward them, "are the result of our engineering team. I'm the direct supervisor." Celeste turned her head very slowly. The kind of slow that comes before a strike you won't see coming, wrapped in perfect manners. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice light but sharp as a blade's edge. "This is Harper's personal presentation. We invited her, not your marketing team. I'm the project director," he tried to interject. "Then you should know when to step aside," Celeste said, her smile unchanged, though her eyes were no longer warm. "We're talking about technology that works, not job titles." A few quiet laughs spread through the room. No applause, but enough nods to turn Gareth's face red. He stepped back, forcing a polite smile, his posture stiff like a man who suddenly realized he was standing under a spotlight he didn't deserve. I said nothing. I didn't have to. The mechanic spoke for me. The demonstration ended with the steady sound of running water. People came up one by one, to look, to ask questions, to touch, to take notes, to shake my hand for real. They invited me to say a few words. I kept it short. The best technology isn't the prettiest one. It's the one that keeps working when you're not standing next to it. The room went quiet for a few seconds, then burst into applause. Not the kind reserved for good presentations, but the kind that greets the truth. As I stepped off the stage, my phone lit up. A message from the company. "Urgent meeting. Be present at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Mandatory." I looked at the screen, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. Not angry, not afraid, just intrigued. The desert never rushes, but once water finds its true path, no one can stop it. And tomorrow morning looked like it was going to be a very interesting one. Within 2 days of the summit, Santa Fe turned into a giant loudspeaker broadcasting everything about me. Local newspapers ran a headline I had to read 3 times before believing it. "An Arizona engineer saves the drought season with pure mechanics." Next to it was a photo of me standing beside the test system, my hair blown by the wind, holding a wrench like it was a microphone. Journalists have always preferred emotional framing over technical accuracy. The foundation was drowning in emails. Celeste called me on the morning of the third day. "Harper, we've received nearly 80 partnership requests from counties, states, agricultural groups, even 2 universities. I know you never wanted to be a spokesperson, but you'll need to get used to people knowing your name." I paused for a few seconds. "As long as they know the technology," I said. "Trust me," Celeste replied, her voice carrying a faint smile. "People remember what works better than who made it." That afternoon, the company sent me an email. Not Gareth's usual sugar-coated style. This one had the kind of tone that comes with the phrase, "must respond within 24 hours," and CC'd the legal department. The message was short, but it reeked of gunpowder. "Harper Lane is suspected of internal data misuse and of using company technical information for personal purposes. You are required to submit all original designs, notes, and related drawings. Internal hearing scheduled for Friday." I read it, set my phone down on the kitchen counter, and watched the glass of water tremble slightly as the air conditioner hummed. I wasn't surprised. Gareth never let the truth get in the way of the story he wanted to tell. That night, I went to the old pump station carrying a folder I'd kept for years. Sketches of mechanical modules from my grad school days, my professor's notes, photos of early prototypes built with scrap parts in my parents' garage. Every page bore a timestamp, something Gareth couldn't edit the way he edited meetings. I sat on the concrete floor, turned on the old fan, and began organizing the documents. The more I sorted, the clearer it became. I didn't just have evidence, I had a lifetime of work. The foundation handled things more professionally than my company ever could. They sent me a USB drive containing video footage of the entire assembly process, from brushing dust off the pipes to testing the water reversal system. "Our legal team suggests you keep this safe," Celeste texted. "I don't want Gareth writing his own version of the story." I sent my email response to the company at 11 that night. Respectful, brief. sharp as a blade pulled from ice. All designs were independently developed prior to my employment with the company. The foundation has recorded the full assembly process. All parts used in the project were either self-purchased or donated by local farmers. I am fully prepared for the hearing. I signed it. No shaking, no anger, just calm, like the still surface of the test tank that evening. The next morning, a message appeared from an old coworker, the kind who always avoided eye contact whenever Gareth entered the room. Harper. Gareth saying, "You stole company IP. He claims you used corporate equipment for your prototype." I replied, "Thank you, don't worry about me." Strange how some people can only afford kindness when no one's watching. By late afternoon, HR sent another notice, internal hearing to include the board of directors. Bringing in the board over a so-called data violation, that level of urgency said a lot. Gareth was panicking, and panicked people always make more mistakes. That night, I returned to the pump station. The three modules still stood quietly under the lamp, but somehow they felt as though they were preparing for tomorrow too. Water ran through the valve with a long, steady sigh. I sat on the old metal chair, opened my sketchbook, and flipped to the first page. The pencil drawing of the pulse valve, still rough but already complete in concept, long before I ever joined the company. I brushed my fingers over the paper. Miguel once said, "What's built from decency will stand longer than what's built from ambition." He was right. And this design was born from more than decency. It came from loss, from responsibility, from the fear of watching a community rely on fragile pipes. The pipe behind me gave a soft, rhythmic hum. I smiled. Even the hum was more honest than Gareth. Later that night, I went home, washed my face, and tied my hair back. The phone buzzed again. This time, an email from Celeste. "Harper, no matter what happens tomorrow, the foundation stands with you. Technical integrity cannot be distorted by company politics." I set the phone down and looked at the streetlights spilling through the window. It wasn't her promise that eased me. It was the fact that I'd waited so long for a day when the entire story would finally be laid on the table, under the light. Tomorrow wouldn't be easy, but I didn't need it to be easy. I just needed it to be right. And right often comes late, but it comes strong. I turned off the lamp, leaving the room in silence. Before sleep took me, I thought of Gareth. Not about what he would do, but about the moment he would finally realize that this time, mechanics weren't on his side. That morning, Phoenix felt heavy, like the desert dust floating in the air. I walked into the company building, where security was so tight it looked more like a secret summit than a hearing for an engineer. But I understood. The real tension wasn't about the hearing, it was about the truth. And truth always makes those who live off lies struggle to breathe. The hearing room was on the top floor, its glass walls looking out over Arizona's cracked earth. The board members, the head of legal, and several senior executives were already seated. At the far end, Gareth was hunched over his laptop, his fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. He was preparing to strike hard. I sat down and opened my folder. No one asked for an opening statement. No one asked if I was ready. So I began, my voice calm and even, like reading a pressure report. I will present the work timeline and origin of the designs. I placed my old documents on the table, sketches of mechanical modules from my graduate school years, dated and signed by my professor, with handwritten notes. These are the conceptual foundations, created and owned before my employment with the company. Later improvements, like the pulse valve and the sand filter, were developed outside any corporate equipment or resources. The head of legal skimmed through the papers and nodded. The board took notes. Gareth clicked his laptop and cut in. Those sketches could have been made afterward. What matters is that Ms. Lane used company resources to build her prototype. I have proof. He hit play. A grainy video appeared, showing me in the company lab weeks ago, testing a metal frame. To anyone unfamiliar with engineering, it might have looked like the same module I had presented in Santa Fe. I glanced once and needed only 3 seconds to spot the flaw, a mistake so obvious it was almost polite to point it out. "May I ask one question?" I said quietly. "Is this the original footage, or did you edit it?" Gareth inhaled sharply. "The IT department sent it to me," he said. I turned to the head of legal. "Please look at this corner." He leaned forward and zoomed in. In the reflection on the glass behind me, something Gareth had missed was perfectly clear: the logo on the frame. It wasn't my mechanical prototype, not the pulse valve, not the expansion joint. It was Gareth's commercial frame, the same one he had brought into the lab to prove his project leadership. In the reflection, I said, "You can see the printed logo. That's the mark of Mr. Cole's electronic product line. And that model weighs 3 times more than the one I am accused of stealing. The object in the video doesn't even operate under mechanical principles." A few board members leaned closer. This time, the head of legal spoke. "The metadata shows the clip was edited twice. The editing software was registered under Mr. Cole's account." The atmosphere shifted, not loudly, but with the weight of truth landing in the room. Gareth straightened, forcing calm. "This is a misunderstanding. I only trimmed the start of the clip for clarity." The head of legal said nothing, just gave him the look of someone who has seen every type of excuse. Celeste stepped forward. She wasn't part of the board, but had been invited as an independent witness. She opened her laptop and played the Foundation's recording. Footage of me at the old pump station, assembling the filter, testing pressure, adjusting valves. No corporate tools, no assistants, no trace of company tech. The Foundation documented the full process, she said calmly, including timestamps, GPS data, and our technical logs. The board took notes. No one asked another question. Then the door opened. The second witness entered, the Navajo farmer who had tested the module at the summit. "I saw her working night after night," he said. "No one from the company came. She brought her own tools. If she says she built it herself, I believe her, because I saw it. No oath was needed. In the desert, truth speaks its own language." Finally, the head of legal placed another document on the table. "Recovered from internal emails," he said. On the screen appeared one of Gareth's messages to the marketing team. "Bury all mechanical approaches. Doesn't fit the image. Push the electronic line for public relations. Do not let Harper present any mechanical version again." A board member looked directly at Gareth. "Do you deny sending this?" Gareth swallowed. "I was only giving public relations direction. The company needs a modern image." The chairperson tapped his finger once on the table. A small sound, but sharper than any argument. "Mr. Cole, this company was built to serve communities, not egos. The board's decision is immediate suspension, full access revocation, and temporary removal from the position pending further investigation." 2 security officers stepped forward. Gareth jumped up, his voice rising. "You are taking her word, an engineer, over mine." I looked at him, said nothing. Didn't need to. A board member answered for me. Not her rank, her evidence. Gareth was escorted out, his footsteps echoing like someone realizing too late that the door he tried to break was made of steel, not illusion. The door closed softly behind him. The board turned back to me. "Harper," the chairperson said, after reviewing the evidence and the technical impact, "we would like to discuss opening a new division focused on low-cost mechanical water solutions. We want you to lead it." I nodded. No excessive joy, no long speech, just one line. "What I need is transparency and full technical autonomy. If I have that, I will give it everything." The chairperson smiled. "You will have it." And for the first time since it all began, the sunlight outside, the sunlight of this harsh land, shone through the glass like a quiet promise that the next chapter would be very different. 3 weeks after the hearing, the first company announcement to all employees was made. I read the email twice to be sure they hadn't sent it to the wrong person. Establishing a new department, Water Mechanics Division. Technical Director, Harper Lane. The moment my name appeared, the room fell into a strange silence. Not awkward, just the kind that comes when people realize the axis of power has quietly shifted and there's no way back. I stood up and accepted the handshake from the board with absolute calm. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The technology had done that for me. 2 days later, the foundation and the company signed a long-term partnership. Celeste visited my new office, a small room full of boxes, no nameplate yet, but sunlight pouring through the window at just the right angle. She placed the contract on the table and said, "Harper, this is the kind of partnership we reserve for those who understand why water should flow where it belongs. You're one of the few people I trust. I smiled, a thin but deep smile. I won't let you down. The foundation provided materials, and the company funded the team and budget. And just as I'd demanded during the hearing, every technical decision belonged entirely to the new division. No more public relations filters. Within 2 months, SandPulse 4.0, the fully mechanical version, was deployed for pilot testing across 7 drought states: Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, West Texas, southern Colorado, and a Navajo Nation site. I drove with the engineering crew from one installation to another. No stage, no spotlight, just the click of bolts and the sound of water moving through steel pipes. The sound farmers simply called life. One afternoon, while I was checking a thermal joint at a farm in southern Arizona, a thin woman in a worn jacket walked toward me. "You're Harper, right?" I nodded. She clasped my hand with both of hers, rough and calloused. "Last summer, we lost almost everything because the electronic system failed. This one," she pointed at the sand pulse, "it just keeps running. Never tired, never ask for a new battery. Thank you." All I could say was, "Mechanics don't take lunch breaks." She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that lightens people when the burden of water has finally been lifted. A few weeks later, I received a thick envelope filled with handwritten letters from students in the Navajo community. Not emails, not messages, real letters. One of them was from a girl named Ayana, 14 years old, her handwriting slightly tilted. "I never thought mechanics was something I could learn. But when I saw your system run using only water and earth, I thought, maybe I want to learn how to make something that works that simply, that beautifully. Thank you for showing me that mechanics can be beautiful." I set the letter down and spent nearly a full minute just breathing. Technology doesn't need praise, but people need to know their effort reached someone. And the words "mechanics can be beautiful" from a young girl in that dry land were beautiful in a way no award could touch. At the office, old coworkers started dropping by the new division more often. Some were asked to join the team. Some just wanted to see the prototype. Some brought coffee as a quiet way of making peace. I didn't resent them. Everyone has their moment of fear or silence. We've all been the silent one in someone else's story. One afternoon, the head of legal stepped into my office just to say, "Harper, you've made us believe that technology can still have a conscience." I replied, "It's not the technology, it's the people who have a conscience." He nodded, eyes slightly red. "Some stories make you realize the business card in your hand feels too small for the weight of your responsibility." And Gareth? News travels fast, like word of rain in the desert. He left the company a week after being suspended. No farewell party, no long email, just a short note from Human Resources. Access revoked. I later heard he'd applied to a startup in California. Soon after, I heard again that he was rejected in the interview when they saw a record mentioning data manipulation concerns. I didn't need to do anything. Truth finds its own path, the way water finds the cracks in stone. I wasn't gloating, not even satisfied, in a loud way. The feeling was closer to balance, like fitting a valve perfectly in place, water flowing in the right direction, pressure distributed evenly, everything back to order. One late afternoon, standing at the 7th installation site where the sun poured over newly irrigated fields, I heard the pulse valve humming, the sand filter clearing itself, the expansion joints breathing with the warm air. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not peace from defeating anyone, but peace because my work had finally reached where it was meant to go. I stood watching the pipe stretch toward the foot of the hills, each section glowing in the sunlight as if saying, "This is my path. Thank you for clearing the way." Desert afternoons always have their own kind of light, not golden like morning, not red like sunset, but something quieter, as if the sun were reminding you that no matter what has happened, it will still set on time. Never rushed, never late, never biased. I returned to the old pump station, the place that had seen so many nights of me repairing pipes, while wondering if I was even heading in the right direction. The metal door still groaned the same way it always had. The wind still carried sand. The water in the tank still rippled softly as it passed through the new sand pulse system. No fireworks, no celebration. Just water flowing where it was meant to. I turned the system on once more, though it didn't need to be turned on. The pulse valve adjusted pressure like breathing. The self-cleaning filter released the sand as if that were its natural purpose. The thermal expansion joint contracted and returned to form without a sound. Everything moved smoothly, like an apology too sincere to be spoken out loud. I sat in the old chair by the wall, the same chair I'd sat in on those first nights, half defeated, half refusing to give up. I put my backpack down, opened it, and took out a brown envelope sent from a farm up north. From Samuel Ortiz, 72 years old. The handwriting was shaky, but beautiful. I unfolded the letter and read it line by line. Harper, I don't know technology. I don't know mechanics. But this year, for the first time in 17 seasons, my cornfields lived. A streak of ink had smudged. I couldn't tell if it was from sweat, tears, or the tremble of his hand. Thank you for not giving up on this desert. The water's running again, and sometimes that's all we need. I folded the letter and set it on my lap, staring at the modules humming steadily like a heartbeat. It was strange. I used to think victory would come when Gareth was fired, or when the board apologized, or when my project made the news. But sitting here, in an unnamed pump station no one would ever visit, I realized that victory wasn't loud at all. It was quieter, more graceful, and far more lasting. It was this water, this letter. These farmers smiled softly when the valves worked. Ayana, the little girl who wanted to be an engineer. None of them needed to know who Gareth was, and truthfully, I didn't need to mention him anymore. I leaned back against the wall and exhaled slowly. My voice slipped into the air, light but clear, like metal brushing metal. I didn't fight back. I just let the water find its path. And the truth did the same. Nothing else needed to be said. Justice isn't a sound. Justice is a function. A soft breeze slipped through the door crack, rustling the papers in my bag. The water kept flowing, and I thought, yes, this is an ending, but also a beginning. There are still dry lands out there, still pipes waiting, still problems knocking. I stood up, turned off the flashlight, and let the afternoon decide which corners of the room it wanted to touch. Before stepping out, I looked one last time at the modules glowing faintly in the fading light. Not flashy, not futuristic, but steadfast. And steadfastness, I thought, might be the most elegant revenge an engineer can have. I stepped outside, the wind brushing through my hair, carrying that familiar scent of dry earth. Then I turned back to the audience who had followed this journey in silence and curiosity, like water moving through cracks, and said, if you love stories of quiet persistence, of justice sage that doesn't shout but still stands strong, subscribe to the channel. Or don't. That's fine too. This water will keep flowing, and I'll keep telling its stories. I walked away, the sand crunching beneath my feet, and behind me, the water kept flowing, steady and patient, like all the right things in life that don't need applause. They only need the chance to exist, and that was enough.